Okay, election results 2021, and we're going to be talking about the City of Olympia, which is the state capital of Washington, and the recent results and the continuation of the dumpster fire in that city. Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Govern. So we are back in Washington State. Again, just going to be talking about some local issues that are relevant here. And as a quick trigger warning to all those who are watching this video, Washington State is in the endless state of emergency that Governor Inslee wants to keep us here as long as he possibly can, with random mandates, random issues, and rules that he just issues at whimsically every week. So it's important to let you know that nothing in this video has been approved by Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance. And even though I don't plan on talking about COVID in this video, it's still important that I point this out to you as a trigger warning. So if you only believe what Inslee wants you to believe, please don't watch any further because you won't listen or want to hear what we have to say. And again, we're mainly focused on the election results from 2021, which in Washington State requires me to explain the fact that the ballots continue to trickle in for weeks. We are only 1 week, little over a week past the election. And the point is, the U.S. Post Office is still finding random ballots that are getting through their system to whatever speed they have, which isn't too high of a priority, but getting the ballots to the auditor's offices and any employees, particularly in King County, who seem to want to find random batches of ballots in their trunks, which seems to be a historical issue there. But today we only want to focus on the City of Olympia. The City of Olympia results are worth covering because this is the state capital for Washington State, located in Thurston County, and it's about 30 minutes from my house, so I try to pay attention to what happens in Olympia because what happens in Olympia never stays there. It tends to spread just like a disease, just like COVID. And the reality is these recent election results in Olympia are going to have an impact on the future of that city. About 5 seats were up for election this cycle, which was unusual because of an appointment, a resignation, an appointment. So there were a lot of seats up for election, and potentially the control of the city could change. First race I wanted to talk about here is position number 7, which is incumbent, longtime incumbent, Jim Cooper has been in office in the city council for quite a while, and he's been kind of fossilized in as part of the established political class in Olympia. And he was challenged this year by a newcomer, Spence Wygant, I should say, and he's an interesting guy because he is a local realtor who had been around the community a long time Olympia resident, and he was really trying to restore some level of sanity to the city, and in fact actually got quite a few endorsements locally and ran a real campaign, looked very good in the primary, but unfortunately he was not able to pull it off. It looks like Jim Cooper, unfortunately for the future of the City of Olympia, managed to pull it off. It was about 1,400 ballots separate them now, and I don't see them discovering enough ballots between now and whenever they close out this election to change that outcome. So it does look like that the long-suffering residents of Olympia will have to suffer a little bit further under Jim Cooper. I've written a lot of articles about this guy. If you want to learn more about him, please look down below. I've written a number of different articles over the years. He did attempt to run for the Thurston County Commission about 4 years ago. The Thurston County voters were wiser than those who live in Olympia and refused to put him in that seat, but it's just interesting to note that he will continue to be on this council for a while, which goes right into this next race that I was watching, and so were a number of other people. Longtime incumbent Clark Gilman, who's kind of been a feature of the Democratic Party for a while, and he's been on the council for a little while, and Candace Mercer, newcomer to the process, was actually... This was an interesting race because she was a kind of an interesting local person, eclectic, tied into the local scene in Olympia, and had written a number of articles, very insightful, long-form articles about the challenges and problems with the way homelessness and drug addiction and other issues are treated in the City of Olympia. They were well-written, thoughtful articles that really had a lot of source documents to them and really showed that she was paying attention to what was happening in the community. And really, it would have been nice to get an alternate voice like hers on the council. Her political background is not, it's not like the Republicans are active in the City of Olympia, so it's not like she was coming as a representative of the Republican Party, but it would have been nice to have somebody who could at least think differently than the groupthink that is typically demonstrated by Mr. Gilman, who will be the councilman moving forward. This race wasn't even close. He had about a 70% to 30% margin, and it's unfortunate to see that Candace wasn't able to do better than this, but it is what it is, and Mr. Gilman's going to be on the council with his good buddy Jim Cooper for at least 4 more years, it looks like. The other race that was really worth watching was the race between Lisa Parsley, who's the incumbent, she was elected 4 years ago to the council, and Talana Reed, who was a newcomer challenging her. And this race was interesting. I've written about Parsley in the past. I'm no fan. I believe that she was quite corrupt and dishonest when she tried to pretend that she lived at her business in downtown Olympia, which doesn't even have a kitchen, and not at her home, which is located outside the city limits. And so falsely representing her residence this way, and the fact that Auditor Mary Hall supported that and wouldn't challenge it at all really doesn't speak well to the rule of law in the city of Olympia. And I felt there's a lot of dishonesty behind the Parsley campaign. But she's just a basic corrupt Democrat, which is pretty common and normal in the city of Olympia. And Talana Reed, who was running against her, was kind of interesting, but very a little bit more extreme than even the city of Olympia can handle. She had about 6 felonies when she jumped into this race and was heavily supported by Antifa and some evergreen college students and BLM, and wanted to disband the police and get pretty crazy. And by her using her own words from videos that had been up at Antifa rallies earlier, she wanted to tear this whole system down. In a way, I kind of was split on this one, because sometimes when you have a corrupt, ossified political class that's in the city, sometimes throwing somebody crazy in the mix might make a big impact. But in the end, the voters of Olympia decided that they did not want crazy on the council, and they would just stick with plain old school corruption. So Lisa Parsley was able to pull it off, and she's on the council. There were a couple other races that were a little less interesting that were going on, where it didn't seem like it would be that contentious in the final results. But essentially, really nothing changed then. So we got an incumbent class that is stuck on the council, and that's probably pretty unfortunate for the people who live there, because inevitably what this means is in the city of Olympia, now the dumpster fire of incompetence, corruption, and bad news is basically going to continue moving forward with this council. And they are completely clueless, or at least unwilling to admit, that they just are a disaster for the people who live there. But of course, they think everything's going great. Now, what this really means, and kind of to follow up on some of the videos I've done before about the city of Olympia, is that the decay and the obvious decay of the city is just going to continue. And this group isn't going to change any of that, and they're just going to continue on in the failed policies of the past, doubling down on those and continuing to move them forward. So one of the questions that tends to come up is, who wins, right? This is, we had this election cycle, there was at least a couple of serious races on the ballot, and who wins from the election results that we have? The first and most obvious one is the drug dealers, the fencing operations, and kind of the criminal element certainly wins. This is the pro-crime crew that's going to be in charge here. They're going to make things as easy as possible for drug dealers, fencing operations, prostitution rings, and anything that takes advantage of the most vulnerable in the community. This council is going to make sure that the environment is optimally structured so that these people can thrive. And so that's kind of unfortunate moving forward, especially if you want to live there. But it's not just them, it's also the grant grifters and the homeless industrial complex. This is bonanza time for them. The people on this council don't know how to say no. They're going to kick as much cash as they can to their friends and allies in these areas. And if you're politically connected and you know which levers to push, and if you know who to convince, you're going to be able to get the gravy train of cash coming, not just from the city, but also from the state and federal grants that are going to probably come through and conceal, just by flooding a lot of money around, it'll conceal some of the other problems, that deficiencies that are there. And inevitably, whenever you have an environment like this where the criminals and the grant grifters and the homeless industrial complex and all these things are being supported, the political insiders and bureaucrats thrive in that kind of environment. So as long as the music keeps playing, everybody is going to be living a great life and having a good time if you're in one of these classes of people in Olympia. And when the music stops and there's not enough chairs, we'll see what happens then. So the question then is, who loses? And clearly, one of the categories of people who do lose are the drug addicts, the homeless, the most vulnerable citizens in the community, despite the fact that they are used as the window dressing for a lot of these grant grifting operations and projects. The reality is they're the ones who are going to lose. The more money that comes in, the worse these people get treated, and the reality is they have fewer opportunities or options, because the money that comes to these programs isn't going to these people. It's always siphoned away to the people who are grifting off the grant. And so these people will not get any help. It's only going to get worse. That's just the way it goes. The other category of people who suffer for sure are taxpayers and people who try to work for a living, because it's going to be their hard work and their life's energy and their cash that get taken by this city council in the form of higher taxes and worse crime and worse environment, as much as possible to fund the operations that this city is going to invent or create or just keep rolling moving forward. And of course, finally, the small businesses are going to suffer. If you haven't had your business shut down or you haven't left the city yet, I'm sure that the future few years will be a little tough for you. It's always possible that some of these big grants coming in from the feds are printing money by the trillions, so maybe some of this money comes to the city and kind of postpones the inevitable a little bit. And so if you have a small business and you're able to survive the next period of time, you could have some really good times in the future, I think, but it's going to be tough, and it's not going to be as easy to run a little business in the city, particularly the way that as hostile as the city is to small businesses in the first place. So we'll just have to see, but I think these are the losers in this case, and it's going to make the city of Olympia a little bit harder to live in and a little bit harder to survive in for a lot of people. Again, one of the other questions then that comes up is, well, what's the city of Olympia going to look like with these people in charge? And I'm not somebody who believes that our salvation is in the political class ever. Even when good people run for office, I don't think that's salvation, but at least they have the ability, if they can get in there, to possibly make change, stop the worst ideas, and maybe shift the city into a better position. Listen, I lived in New York City for 4 years, pre-Giuliani. I know what it's like to have a city going to hell and crashing all around you. But unfortunately, in the city of Olympia, this is pretty much going to be how it looks moving forward. Needles will be found in more places, and since the city hands them out by the bucketful and by the case, I would expect that the pollution in the environment and the urban centers is only going to get worse. It's not like these people are actually serious about fixing these problems, and the only way you can keep the grant grifting going on is if the problem gets worse. And the city council is going to be highly incentivized, as they have been for quite a while, and continuing and making sure that this problem just continues to grow and keeps getting worse. So that's unfortunate, and it sucks, but that's how it's going, and that's what I see happening in the city of Olympia right now. Now, what happens next? What are the other issues that we have to deal with in the city of Olympia? Well, I want to point out crime will get worse. My sources inside the Olympia Police Department tell me that they've been told to downgrade and to conceal some of the crime stats. A lot of this comes right from the top. The city wants to pretend that things aren't as bad as they really are. Nevertheless, it's going to be difficult to conceal just how bad the crime does get. Not just violent crime, but also the low-level property crime that tends to permeate a community and generally change the sense of it being a good place to live. Taxes will inevitably go higher. That's no surprise to anybody that knows these guys on the council. Any excuse they have to raise taxes, they will seek and find, because there's always another grant grifting operation right around the corner, another way to waste your money. Waste and incompetence will only continue to grow. It's the nature of bureaucracy. The more bureaucracy they get and the more grants and programs they have, the more waste and incompetence will come to become synonymous, of course, as it already is with the city of Olympia. And transparency will become a more difficult thing. They're going to become less transparent, as they usually are when that happens. And of course, the Democratic Party is going to celebrate the great success that they have in the city of Olympia. It's sort of funny because it's not like the Republican Party has much of a presence there or has any way of pushing back on what's going on. This is a uniparty city and a uniparty approach to everything, but it would have been nice during this last election cycle to at least have some independent thought or some people who thought a little bit differently than the crew in there right now. But that's where we're at, and that's where it's going. The one thing I want to point out, and I think it's worth mentioning to people, is that voter turnout was really pathetic. I mean, we had about 36%, maybe it gets up to 40% when they collect all the last loose ballots that are floating around there. But that is not a high voter turnout. And when you want to make change in a city like Olympia, you need a higher voter turnout of people who actually want that change. And instead, apathy seemed to rule the day. That made it very difficult to make the change that the city of Olympia needs. Now, that being said, inevitably, change is going to be inevitable. This is just how things go. There's no such thing as a stasis in politics or a city or a state or a country. Change is always happening, and this change tends to go in cycles. It tends to go up and down. Right now, they're on a steep downward spiral in the city of Olympia, but that won't last forever. And it's really important that those of us who want to turn it around, we pay attention, we document, we see what's going on, work on trying to get good people who are willing to stand up and run serious modern campaigns to actually try to get back some level of control over the unfolding disaster, the slow motion train wreck that the City of Olympia is becoming. So I think that's important for people to remember, that nothing is inevitable and that inevitably things do change. So keep in mind, this is just one of many election cycles. You got another opportunity to make an impact in these local governments. That will happen over the next couple years. You got a midterm election next year, and there's a lot of opportunities to make change. So I want to mention that anybody who wants to get more background on this, please read some of the articles below. Go to my website, wethegovern.com. I've got a lot of articles about the City of Olympia and elections, both this year and years past. And also, don't forget to subscribe and share with others. It's one of the only ways to distribute this information. You can also subscribe on my website to the email list that we have. And I really appreciate those who have listened to this and are willing to share it with others. Remember, it really does matter that we're involved, because the future belongs to those who show up.